In this video, we're going to explore a few common conditions of the female reproductive system. We'll look at their key signals and talk about why paying attention early is just so important.
Okay, so here's our plan. We'll start by looking at some specific health conditions. Then we're going to dig into a really big challenge and how they're understood. And finally, we'll explore what a new path towards truly personalized care could look like. So first things first, let's get a solid handle on the basics. We're going to dive into 3 common but pretty different reproductive health conditions and, what you should really be watching for.
Let's kick things off with uterine fibroids. Now, these are non-cancerous growths that develop right in the uterus, and they're actually way more common than you might think.
What's really interesting here are the connections. Things like obesity or PCOS can actually increase the risk for fibroids. And because these growths are sensitive to hormones, they can cause symptoms like heavy bleeding or even create challenges with fertility. It just goes to show how interconnected all of our body systems really are.
All right, next up is endometrial cancer. This one affects the lining of the uterus, and you'll see how this connects back to what we were just talking about with hormonal influence.
With this, that strong link to hormonal imbalances is absolutely key. And you'll see some of those same risk factors again, like obesity and insulin resistance. But here's the crucial part. The most common early warning sign is abnormal uterine bleeding. That's something that should always be checked out by a professional.
And to round out this section, let's talk about something that's more about the timeline of reproductive health, the risk of early menopause.
You can really see here how a whole mix of things, from our genetics to our stress levels, can influence when menopause begins. We can actually get clues from biological markers in our blood, like FSH and AMH levels, and understanding this is so important because when ovarian function declines earlier, it can increase the long-term risk for other conditions, like osteoporosis.
Okay, so we've got a handle on a few conditions, but now let's pivot a little bit. We need to talk about a fundamental challenge that makes diagnosing these conditions and others like them so surprisingly difficult. It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I mean, if we know the symptoms and the risk factors, why do we so often struggle to catch these things early and accurately?
Well, here's a really powerful idea to think about. What if the problem isn't just the conditions themselves? What if it's the very foundation of how we look at the data, how we interpret the signals our bodies are sending us in the first place?
Right, let's get into the specifics of that. Why do our standard tools, like the lab tests we rely on, so often miss the mark when it comes to female physiology? So here's the core of the problem. A lot of current lab tools use these generic, one-size-fits-all reference ranges. They tend to ignore really crucial context, like where a woman is in her hormonal cycle. And they often look at health markers as just isolated numbers, completely missing how all these different systems are connected and talking to each other.
So what does this actually mean in the real world? Well, this data gap is a huge roadblock. It's what's holding us back from building accurate AI models, from detecting risks earlier, and from getting those truly personalized health recommendations that we hear so much about.
Okay, so if the old model is flawed, what does a better, more effective approach actually look like? How can we build a new framework for understanding all this vital health data?
This new way of doing things, this new paradigm, really calls for a complete shift in thinking. It all starts with applying logic that's specifically designed for women, not just generic norms. It means integrating physiological context and analyzing the patterns between different biomarkers, instead of just staring at single data points. The whole goal is to detect these subtle shifts in function long before they ever become full-blown symptoms.
And that's the goal, right? By completely re-engineering the analysis from the ground up, the idea is to create that missing data layer, that foundation that will finally let things like AI and other digital tools actually work the way they're supposed to for women's health.
All right, let's tie this all together now and look at the real-world impact. What does this new, data-driven approach really mean for the future of our healthcare?
The entire field of digital health is really heading in this direction. We're moving away from that generic wellness advice and shifting towards truly personalized care that's driven by your unique biological data. And having the right data, interpreted the right way, is the absolute key to unlocking all of this.
And this brings us full circle, right back to where we started. Better data, looked at through a lens that's actually designed for female physiology, means a much better shot at catching things like uterine fibroids, endometrial cancer, and early menopause risk much sooner. It connects all the dots from the data to the diagnosis.
Look, all this technology is an amazing tool, but the most important step still begins with you. recognizing symptoms early, and really advocating for yourself with a qualified professional, that is the single best way to protect your fertility and your health for the long run.
So, we'll leave you with this to think about. When we understand the limitations of our current systems, and when we advocate for better ones, we empower ourselves. A future of truly personalized, data-driven healthcare isn't just about better gadgets. It's about asking better questions, getting better answers, and ultimately having better health.